where I got absolutely smoked by security guards. But there's a lot of ecstasy going to the place. They won $6 million against the police. There's going to be a raid tonight. Make sure you got no drugs on you. So some people were taking it, some people were dropping it. He just chinned me straight in the chin. All right, welcome back. We are back in the Melbourne CBD. It's been a hot minute. It's a Sunday day. I'm fresh, awake, and ready to rock. We are going to walk through Melbourne's nightclub and we're going to uncover some of the best underground nightclubs, secrets, and crazy club stories that this city had to offer back in the 90s, the noughties, 10s, up until to this day. It's been a hot minute, but we're back. We're out here, sussing the streets of Melbourne, doing a little tour of the most iconic nightclubs. And the first one we're going to start with is one that comes up time and time again when I bring up any nightclub, techno, rave, fucking acid house. Someone mentions it. It was a cornerstone in the 90s and 2000s. Some people called it Tezza, but for others it didn't. They called it Teriyaki, Anarki, Saki. What that name meant, fuck if I know. It was run by a guy called Jason and David, and basically this was one of the most cornerstone venues, as I said before, when it came to pushing musical, especially electronic boundaries. It was known for its like diverse crowd. A lot of people are connected to honky tonks. Like that's the two things that I hear often is people say a lot of the crew that were there or involved in it went on to sort of take those ethos to honky tonks, which obviously if you've been there, it was super eclectic, unbelievable fucking vibe. It was a bit about fashion, it was music, it was everything mixed together. I'm gonna go check it out. It was on Swanston Street and it was Hi-Fi Bar. So Hi-Fi Bar, if you're into bands, no doubt you've been there. It's now called Max Watts Bar because they had to change it, something went different. Before it was the Hi-Fi Bar, it was Century Cinema. So one of the first cinemas in Melbourne, and then they turned it into, that was like 1940s I believe, and then eventually they turned it into a band room, and then eventually there's some point in the 90s, there's a bit of a protest going on. So at some point in the 90s they changed it over and they basically started up, just down there, I'm going the wrong way. At some point in the early 90s they started up and they turned it into a nightclub on the Thursday night, and the Thursday nights would go into the early AMs of the morning, but people dancing on Friday mornings, which wasn't uncommon back in the day. Obviously now there's zero fucking Thursdays around in Melbourne at minimum, and if they are, they finish at 3 p.m. But this one, we used to go into the early hours and people would kick on, and most of the people I spoke to, even the rave guys, to the techno guys, to the house guys, a lot of them would start their weekend here and then they continue on for all hours and all times and all nights for the rest of the week. But it was not uncommon back then that people basically would party 5 to 6 days, and every single night there was a nightclub open. Now, it's not something that you see very often. That's gone, but even when I was around, Wednesday to fucking Sunday, you could still go out. Monday, Tuesday we'd have off, but back when this was popping off, every single night was popping off. And that's Max Watts now, but it was the Hi-Fi Bar. As you can see, Century Building, which was that cinema, it still has that there. I think it might still actually be a cinema, am I right or wrong? And then down here is where you'd roll down and party to guys like Honey Smack, Slack, DD, a bunch of other DJs. Well, I could not mention because, as I had said, people kind of credit this to be one of the forefathers of electronic music, or at least progressive electronic music in Melbourne. All right, let's keep going. I was low-key planning on coming down here and it was going to be dead on Sunday, and boy was I wrong, it is actually packed. A little bit awkward, but thank fuck I'm used to talking on camera now. All right, up here we've got Lounge Bar. So here is one of the most iconic venues in Melbourne when it comes to electronic dance music. The club originally opened in like 1989, was supposed to be like a forward-thinking for like art area, music and whatnot. But it really became famous for electronic music around about 1992 with a club called Club Filtr. They had artists like DJ Hal, Stacey Pullen, Richie Horton, some of the big fucking dogs across from me behind in that venue. In 1992, techno was not mainstream. It just sort of come into Australia, sort of like in the late 80s into the early 90s, and that became the home of it. And again, much like Teriyaki, Sanaki, blah, 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 Ariki, whatever the hell, Tezza's, this place behind me was one of the forefathers of that, and it was on a Wednesday night. So it was, Teriyaki was on Thursday, or Tezza's was on Thursday. This was on a Wednesday night. Most people, when it comes to Club Filtr, they will say it was the breeding ground or the beginning of dance, sort of underground dance music in Melbourne. Club Filtr at one point was coined as like the longest running night or midweek night or some shit like that. And then Club Lounge afterwards, Lounge Bar ran until 2000. It ran to 2019, and much the same as most nightclubs in Melbourne. The reason why it shut down was due to like a landlord fight. So they decided they were going to redevelop it. They obviously haven't, still sitting behind us. The guy that did St. Jerome's and did Verodic and a bunch of other like cool kind of, Section 8 actually, take that back, wasn't St. Jerome's, Section 8. He took it on for a little bit and then handed it back over. But Lounge was at one point the longest running nightclub in Melbourne. But they went out in true style. They fell on their sword with grace. They ran 29 closing parties in a row, back to back to back to back. And then that was the end of lounge. And lounge became, in its later years, obviously it was one of the founders of the techno scene or the electronic music scene in Melbourne, but it kind of went on to become like a staple for like very educated people. It was very gritty, but like people that like understood music or wanted to hear new shit. Because as it got more and more commercial, there was more and more commercial offerings. This place offered a place where people could go. Had guys like Nick Coleman, T-Rex, Boogs and shit. They were playing here regularly, and this is where they could push the boundary. It was sort of like an earlier Revs. You kind of come here, a lot of that crowd from Revs would come here beforehand, then they'd travel over to Revs when this closed up. So that's Lounge. It's on Swanston Street too. Plays a very integral, important part into our Melbourne music industry. So now we're going to keep going. We're going to keep heading down that way and go on to suss other fucking iconic nightclubs of Melbourne. Some controversial, some completely insane, others just absolute cornerstones, absolute fucking bigger than myths themselves. We're going to go suss them all. F4 was the first recovery nightclub I ever went to. I was in year 12. I remember I went to watch their In The Mix, Boogs versus Tigger, and I came here afterwards. And I remember one of my friends saying to me like, oh, we're going to a recovery club. I'm like, oh yeah, because I was still fucking rare and ready to go. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, that's cool. Like, where are you going to go? He's like, we're going to go to F4. I was like, sweet. So I went down to F4 and I was expecting it to be like really chill, like light music, like maybe fucking like the massage music in the background, someone just to kind of like talk to friends and just wind down. And I was wrong. I rocked up and it was fucking electronic music blaring and everyone was ready to go. We powered back up and we rocked on to the early hours of the morning. But that was my first taste of recovery clubs and I was like, I rate this. This is fucking sick. And then I continue to do that throughout Melbourne because you can for a couple of years onwards. Other than that, I ran an event here with a group called Nardastrom and a guy called Mike Toner from Thick as Thieves. We ran a charity event here. And I think we raised about $11,000. This is back would have been 2012 or something like that on a Thursday night. So I used to have like a kind of like indie night. They used to run Thursday, Friday, Saturday when they were New Guernica, but at this point it wasn't F4. So F4 was ran by Jaff, the same guy who then went on to do New Guernica. Then went on to do Dove Club and still does New Guernica. It's in Collingwood now, just off Fitzroy Street. But Jaff's been around doing shit for ages. He was also tied into Honky Tonk. So it's kind of funny because you talk about Lounge, you talk about Teriyaki or Tez's, and these three kind of clubs were like not loosely connected. They were loosely connected, I'd say. Sorry, they weren't fully connected, but a lot of the crews and whatnot, they married up in between these three venues. So the venue itself was sick, like sick decor. So you went up the stairs, they had like a little like concave you could smoke on outside, and the inside looked like the outside of a house, but it was like a bad mushroom trip. So it was all like you could see the outside of the house, but you were inside the club, and it was fucking very well crafted. This is when it was New Guernica. And then they had a room that was called the kitchen, and that kitchen looked like exactly how you'd imagine a grandma's kitchen. And then their DJs would be playing on the sync, so it was almost like a kick-on. Imagine like a good kick-on. They basically built a good kick-on in the nightclub. It went on at the end of its tenure when it was Dove Club. It was Turbo 322 or 244, some shit like that. Don't hold me to it. That's gone on now to Turbo 422. And again, I might be wrong with that fucking number configuration there, but that is probably the busiest nightclub in Melbourne now. That's run by a guy called Andreas Mango and Ryan Haynes. And a bunch of other young guys they're helping learn the ropes. And those boys, they were Loud Boys originally. So Mango worked with us or myself for 10 years. And then Ryan Haynes, he sort of came through and we did a bunch of like little university parties and odds and ends. And then he came on and we started doing stuff together and all over Melbourne. And they're killing it. They're some of their best promoters in Melbourne right now when it comes to that forward-thinking music styles like hard groove, hard techno, blah, blah, blah. They're always ahead of the curve. Anyway, that is the old New Guernica. Sick looking venue, huh? Sick looking outdoor area. We're just down from Burke Street, and here, though you can't see the sign, this is a little lane called McKillop Lane. And if I say that name and you know what club I'm talking about, which has been knocked down, as you can see here, you are going to be like, oh, yep, I know this one already. So now, this one was called CBD. And in 2015, it closed. It opened many years beforehand, and it was in this venue here, and you'd walk up to like a door like this, and you go straight up until... And there was like 4 or 5 levels, like relatively small. I ran one event here and it would have been like 2014. The venue was run down as fuck, I'm not gonna lie. I remember thinking, this is gross. It had like, back then there was this like big thing in nightclubs where, especially like prior to 2000s, where they would use like, I guess it was like rave shit, but they would use like a Lycra and they'd like pull it into different angles like a spider web, and that would be a decoration. And they used to say that, plus like the multifaceted, almost like think police lights, but like with 5 or 6 colors. That was really common in nightclubs. This joint had that, and I remember thinking, that is tacky as fuck. And then the second to that, it had like this cinema upstairs at the top level, And in the cinema, there was always beanbags and shit. So you could get like off your guts and then watch a movie or whatever was in there. And when we did it was horror movies. But I remember thinking, you couldn't pay me to sit in those fucking beanbags. They are rank as. But anyway, into the history, not to do with me. Another time I'd been here other than running that event was just, I remember I was at a party up the road up in Spring Street at Corova. We actually got kicked out because one of the guys who owned the nightclub wouldn't give the hard drive over from the week before from the police because he had an altercation with someone. We got booted. We went to Wawa. We got them to open up for us. I bought all our crowd, like 200 people from Burke Street down to Wawa. And then after that finished that night, I decided to come down here to visit a mate of mine who was lived with a guy called Hellraiser, an iconic techno head, to pick up roundies to go to Revs. So basically that's like my only 2 times that I'd really been to this venue. And when I came, I remember thinking, this was the end of the hardstyle days, but I remember thinking, this joint's shonky as fuck. So anyway, I'm sure it wasn't at one point because it was a peak, and CBD was one of the pillar stones of that hardstyle era. Base Station started here, Jason and Mark Bidrow, and then eventually outgrew it and it went to its last location, or the location it was most famous for, which was obviously at the Palace in St Kilda, and then where Twister was. And then other than that, this was still a pillar Friday nights, especially for hardstyle. So a lot of like those big hardstyle DJs, they used to play through here, and it was a little club that could. It played, when people talk about the history of that hardstyle era, Base Station, Hard Candy, Pharmacy, all that stuff, people do mention CBD. It played its part. The other nightclub names that I don't mention are 3D and DVA. I just forgot about them as I was saying it. No doubt. But that is CBD McKillop's Lane. As you can see, it also has failed the fate as most of the clubs that I show you guys. It is now being redeveloped into no doubt apartments or some shit. What a fucking city. Let's keep going. I've just come down here to check it out to see if I'm wrong. My memory was it was like on the corner of that street, but that building looks like it's been relatively developed. So I've just come down here to check, but this is not ringing any memories. Anyway, if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. Or was it here? I don't know. It says 12 to 14. Maybe it's that one there. I'm wigging out. Help me, guys. So this one here, we are now at 331 Flenders Lane, and we're going to go through here, a little club. It's actually cool for me to walk through this and experience it because it was in the 90s, but this is probably one of the darkest days in nightclub history that I'm about to talk about. A little bit of a brief before I go into exactly what happened. But there was a guy called Gavin Campbell. Gavin Campbell is probably, he's probably the reason why Melbourne club culture is so fucking good and cool. But he basically figured out a way back in the day to sort of overcome traditional licensing laws. So he would find, there was these old gentleman clubs back in the day where they would have like, so it was like a car club or a gentleman's club or whatever. And basically what would be is you could sign in, like an RSL almost, and you could go down to these places and have a beer, smoke cigars, do whatever. They were all over the city, all over Melbourne. So at this time, they were really losing their membership. It was becoming an old hat thing, and they were looking for ways to make money. Gavin Campbell had come up with this concept where with a club called Razor, another club which was behind me, which was called Tasty Clubs in the 90s, which had a very iconic thing happen to it. Basically what he figured out is that if you signed into these clubs, you could go in, licenses were a lot easier, you could stay trading for a long, long time, and it really kind of gave Melbourne that evolution that turned into that recovery club, that really fucking hectic, deep nightclub culture that this city has. After the success of Razor Club, Gavin came up with a concept called Tasty Club, which was sort of like it was a queer-friendly, but like sort of semi-straight. I guess it was for people who were looking for something different. So it was like kind of a meeting place of just like-minded people, I guess. In the 80s and 90s, you're talking peak homophobia. There's police bashing gay people all the time, and it's sort of getting pushed under the rug. So this is where this story begins. Tasty Club's around for about 2 years, I believe. Gavin sort of at the forefront of it. Very, as I said, leading in the electronic music space. It's gone from like discotheque at Razor to a full-blown dance club, and it's getting the attention of the police. And basically the reason why it's getting attention for the police is for all the wrong reasons. They don't understand it. There's gay people, there's straight people, there's people getting walked around in leashes, there's BDMSN. There's basically zero to no rules in this joint, but there's a lot of ecstasy going through the place. It's a peak sort of era of ecstasy coming into dance parties. Basically from there, the police is sort of coming around, and they've got to look at something. There's a whole lot of pressure, and you can go. So the police, there's obviously drugs going around all throughout Melbourne, and it's in the news, it's in the media. Like, what is this new thing? What is this dance party ecstasy? Like the media always does. It's just attacking something, and it's attacking that at the time. And the police, they've got to be seen to be doing something. So there's multiple clubs around this area popping off, but they're like, well, they know this one, and they don't really understand it. They're like, fuck, let's target it on this one. And on this night, if you're interested to hear more about this, I actually interviewed Gavin. It's probably one of the best interviews I've done. So you can go check it out, Gavin Campbell, on my YouTube. But he tells me that they get a call on a landline phone and they say, hey, there's going to be a raid tonight at this club. So they do what all nightclub owners would do in this position. And they basically call up all the locals and punters and go, hey, we've got word that there's going to be a raid. And this is something that would traditionally happen. I'm not even going to lie. Like in my time, we would have times where they would say, we'd have like someone would be like, oh, they're going to pull dogs through the lines, or there's going to be dogs at a festival. If we knew, it would get around and we would tell people, because at the end of the day, when it comes to nightclub owners, we're not anti-drugs. We're anti-drug problems, but we're not anti-drugs per se. So I guess it's like, some people would look at that and go, oh, that's an illegal tendency, or, that was a bad way to deal with it. But like, at the end of the day, I did it myself. So who the fuck am I to tell people not to do them? I'm not a police officer. I'm not the government. As long as you do them safely, that's all I really care about. And we sort of, I guess, in the nightclub world, have always sort of held space for people that were going to do things like that. So that's what he did. And I'm saying that because I don't want to make him look like a bad guy, because as I said, I've done it myself, and I know the majority of the people that I work with, if not all of them, have at some point tipped someone off with something like that, because it's just the nature of the industry. So then that night, not a lot of people come down, but there is some people that come down. And then when they roll up, they tell them on the door, because they don't want to get this place closed, because it's so special to everybody. They say, hey, there's going to be a raid tonight. Make sure you've got no drugs on you. So some people are taking it, some people are dropping it, they're doing whatever. They roll through the nightclub, and then about 2 a.m. in the morning, don't hold me to it, you can go watch the interview with Gav, you want the exact time. They roll through, the cops roll up, they walk into this one weird and wonderful place. So there was 2 levels in this place, and the downstairs part, it was a sex club. You could basically go down there and have sex. There was no laws, because again, it goes back to that whole commerce club thing that I was talking about. They were allowed to do that. You were allowed to do whatever the fuck you wanted in these spaces. If you have a pub, you can't just have sex in the toilets or have sex in a room. You have to have a special sex license. They didn't need to do that, because they were using these sort of clubs, I guess. So anyway, the cops go in there, and there's they, them, there's gay people, straight people, there's people dressed up in all kinds of different costumes, and these are just fucking dudes from the 90s. So you can imagine they're like, what the fuck? So they're going through people, and then when their DJ comes on, he hit the smoke machine to kind of give time for people to drop anything or get rid of it. Cops didn't take lightly to that. They fucking lost it. So after that, they just kind of continued to get more and more savage. So they were like, they split them up to girls, guys, and sort of anything they didn't understand. And they strip searched them, and they made them undress themselves and lift up their pieces and bend over. And the search went for like 6 or 7 hours, and people were crying. They weren't given water. They weren't allowed to go to the toilet. And it was basically a fucking hate crime. They leave, and back then, there's no real social media and something like that. So there's no outrage can get out there really, really quickly. A lot of people that used to come to these sort of clubs too, they may have been married, they might have been in a relationship, they might not have been out of the closet. So there was a lot of people saying, well, I don't really want to say anything. I don't want to kick the bee's nest. But eventually some brave guys came along, and they were like, nah, fuck that. We're going to do something about this. Word spread in the club world what happened. And basically from there, what they did was they started they set up in a place where people could come and tell their stories, and they did like a civil group that came together, and I can't remember the word, but no doubt someone will comment if you can remember the word I'm talking about. But they joined forces, and they sued the cops, and they won. They won $6 million against the police. And what that did for the Melbourne industry, this is an interesting thing. What it did was the police were like, fuck. So they came in here to try to raid drugs and do whatever, and they were too heavy-handed. So after that, I honestly believe that what happened to Tasty, they walked so everybody else in the industry could run. After that, it was basically a free-for-all, right? So in Melbourne, there was recovery clubs. In my peak, there was 15, 16 nightclubs that used to run all day Sunday. You could buy drugs from the fucking guards as you walked in. It was very much so like a free space. Almost at times you'd forget that it was illegal, because that's how fucking out there it was. The police would never really come in, and they weren't heavy-handed. And the reason why they weren't was because of this moment here. This iconic moment behind me at Tasty Club. It was the reason that they were never ever heavy-handed, and probably still continue not to be. So as other states got dogs come through, and they were more, not as aggressive as that night, but they had more and more pressure. We didn't have that in Melbourne. We had a bit of a free-for-all, which created this amazing nightclub, techno, fucking electronic music place that has now gone on to blow artists up all over the world. And we've seen people talk about our city like it's a Berlin or a Chicago, again, all over the world, because of this, I believe, this moment. So I could be wrong. I'd love to hear what you guys think. I think the fact that the police eased off and it gave us a free space to be creative is the reason why this city became so special at night. And I've seen it here. I'm pretty sure it's this door here, but in the old photos, it's just literally a red light that says Commerce Club above it. And there's a line going out. Could be that, maybe that, but it's the back of the Commerce Club is what it was called. But I don't know exactly, because again, I wasn't partying in the early 90s, so I can't talk on where it was, but I've seen the old photos, and this is exactly where it was, somewhere here. But there was a black door with a security guard at the front, and it just said Commerce Club with a red light, and that was it. There was no telltale signs, there was no sign saying Tasty, there was none of that. It was literally just like a fucking back door as an entry, and that was it. But a lot of the nightclubs back in the day were like that, like Honky Tonk, same shit. You walked up, there was a guard at the front. There was no big sign or anything like that. It was sort of a Melbourne telltale back in the day, and I reckon they should bring it back, because it's fucking cool shit. Can you imagine walking in, right? Like that there. It's fucking early hours in the morning with your mates, and there's people with leads and all kinds of wild attire walking down this alleyway into a back door with just a little red light. So sick. And just down from Tasty Club, in a different decade, there is a nightclub called Bond. And we talk about Bond. It was, when it first opened, it fucking took the media by storm because it was meant to be, or was, the most expensive nightclub built at the time. And they had the most expensive booth you could buy. The guys who were running it were very, very good Asian promoters called Tang. Probably the best in, I'd say, the country. So Bond was built into the basement here. It goes down under the ground. Oh no, sorry, here it is. So Bond was built into the car park, underneath the car park. And we love a good underground car park nightclub. And why do we love them? Because it means you don't get fucking sound complaints. So they're the best for sound systems. So Bond is here. That's obviously the smoking area. You walk in through the front door. And when you come here on a Saturday night, so occasionally, a Friday night too, I would occasionally come down here just to check out the fucking car. Directly behind me, there'll be Lamborghinis, Ferraris, there'll be all the Ashley Martins, or Aston Martins, what the fuck they're called. They would all be behind you, just parked. And they would have like a valet service. And then these young, like 18-year-old Chinese kids would just walk straight in that venue. They had like a booth option. I think it was like 50K or some shit. And it included like a helicopter that landed at Crown and took you over in a chauffeured service. And there was like all fucking aces of spades and rah rah. And they sold them. They sold them at times. And also too, they're probably like at one point, the Asian night they had, they'd have multiple guys who's dropping $10,000, $20,000 a night in booths. So this is one of like the first OG, like real big booth clubs in Melbourne. Miss Collins is obviously another one. They're really, really popped off. And I'd say arguably one of the most successful when it comes to booth culture. But Bond was sort of like for rich people. It was a place built for rich people. On the Saturday night, Sean Roll and a bunch of other guys, I think Sean might have even been a partner in it, they would basically bring it on the white rich people and the white classy people who wear shirts and fucking suits and whatnot. So you can imagine I wasn't there. And then on the Friday, they had the Asian night, and that was like just stupid money. Like, think crazy rich Asian fucking money. That is Bond. He's now, I think the Saturdays is on break, but it's still operating. So this is a nightclub that's still operating and still selling booths for fucking large sums of money. So if you have heaps of cash, you're watching this and you want to do that, come down here and help out the Tang boys because they're fucking legends. All right, we're pumping through and my voice box is getting quicker and 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 quicker. And now we're going to head over to the docks to go check out a club that unfortunately got ripped away from the owner's hands, from the government, in a very spectacular way. So come with me. So let's go suss it. So we're down in Docklands, and I actually wasn't expecting this, but where this next club was, it's been fucking completely ripped down. To get a good angle of it, but if you know, you know, this was where the original Shed 14 raves were. Raves like Apollo, all the OG hardware ones. There was also fucking Mark James running shit down here. And then down towards the, not later part, but like 2000s, it became the space for Alumbra. And if you're a European from the north or western suburbs, you have definitely chucked on some tappers and had a fucking dance down here. I myself ended up running a whole bunch of raves here. Let's get stuck into them and try and find an angle so I can kind of like paint the picture, I guess. So directly behind me, as I said, used to lay Shed 14, and then it was Alumbra at the end of the pier. But now it's completely gone, they've ripped it down, and that's a big part of the story. So Alumbra, run by a guy called Simon Digby. It used to be over that way towards like Crown Way, and then they eventually shut down. It was like this little 400-person venue, and it came here. And then this Alumbra, the one that was behind me, held fucking heaps of people. So they had the Saturdays, and they also had soul sessions on Sundays, which was a massive R&B night, really iconic. They still do like reunions now at the Pump. And then their Saturday night was massive, guys like Nick Vass, Simon Digby, obviously one of the owners, Bobby Love, but the list goes on of mad promoters that worked behind me here. And myself, we started to run just before it finished. There was a guy called Danny McFadden, or Macca, we call him. He basically, from Happening Group, he basically started to, I don't know if he came up with the idea or how it fucking happened, but he basically started to book it during the day. And we were like, hands up, we'll take it. So these guys, Simon & Co., they also owned, or a lot of the owners from this one also owned part of Miss Collins, but also XE54, which was like, at the time, was a real groundbreaking, fucking, I guess, underground dance music, lighting thing. I don't know, like an epilepsy space, I guess. We used to be the old Eve. So yeah, behind me, they started letting us use it during the day, and I did some of the biggest events I ever did. So I did Debbie Does Discos here, and we were doing like 1800, not biggest events I ever did, that's an absolute cop-out. And I did some of the biggest club events I did, especially day parties here. So we were doing 1800 heads, and we were doing that Melbourne sound, guys like orchestrated and whatnot, through a brand that I had called Debbie Does. They used to sell out. We didn't even used to put out the lineup. We used to literally just say, this is the date, day party on this Saturday. We put out tickets, and we sold 1800 tickets in literally not even an hour. And then we would put put out the lineup, but people trusted us so much that it was, if you talk about like that sort of 2000 and, I don't know, 10 to 2020, I'd say that was probably the most dominant brand in that scene and space. And we used to move it around. It was like a fucking, it was a nomadic brand. So we used to do a lot of stuff at Penny Black. We used to do a lot of stuff during Alumbra. They were always during the day. So it was Debbie Does Daytime is how it started. And originally it actually started at Winter Sounds at Tramp, because Winter Sound System was a festival that ran. And then we did the recovery. So we took over 6 a.m. We ran to 6 p.m. So a lot of the early Debbie Does, they used to run 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. And then eventually we moved them on to Saturdays. They got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we started doing 1800 to 2000 for years and years and years. Put my kids through school, bought my fucking house. Anyway, that was that event there. I'll add some clips in there because I'll have some right here. What happened to Alumbra was basically out of fucking nowhere. So we're making cash, they're making cash, everyone's killing it. And basically out of nowhere, they get a phone call that something's going on. The owner signed Diggy, I interviewed, so you can actually hear the story from firsthand from him if you like, if you go check it out. And he basically said that he got a phone call saying, hey, structurally their pier can't hold their space anymore. So you had Shed 14, which was all done up and fancy. A lot of people doing big weddings and like 1,000 people venues and stuff. 1,000 people events and stuff. And then you had Alumbra, which was fucking pumping. It was still in its peak. And they weren't even allowed to go back there to get the decks. It was deemed so unsafe that they couldn't even go back there to get anything. So then one day they just got told, hey, you gotta shut up shop. You can't go on the pier and we're going to rip it down. As you can see, they've ripped it down. They're ripping it down right now behind me. That was sort of a wild thing. And to be honest, there was a lot of conspiracies. Everyone's like, what's going on here? Has someone gone out there and fucked it up? Is there something more behind this story? From my understanding, there wasn't. It structurally wasn't right. And then that's just how government deals with shit. But the rumor mill got around that there was something sus going on. There's another little nightclub over here, right at the back there, called Atet, that's been in the news a lot. I actually again interviewed the guy who ran it, and that one there did get fucked over by the government, and now it's sort of almost proven. So basically there was the first ever floating nightclub. They were running like rave events and stuff there. Again, day party, sort of midday to 11 p.m. at night time, sick space. And a guy called Jake Hughes. And then they started getting complaints from the people that were living there. Even though everyone knew it was around, Melbourne City Council, not only did they support it, they heard it, but basically they started to get noise complaints and they had to continue to move through these different leaps and bounds to get past it. But they were in a normal level and all their readings were right, but they were still getting complaints. And over time, this Melbourne City Council was working with them, and then out of nowhere, they just flipped. Something had changed in the government, and they basically had decided they were going to shut them down. So again, much the same as Alumbra, they literally came and said, hey, bang, you got to close for 7 days, and you got to prove that whatever, and they wouldn't work with them. So it's still shut now. It's been almost 2 years, and they've been completely shut down by Melbourne City Council. And then I don't want to say that this is the rumor, I guess I can say. I can't say it's proof in it. Zuff. Yeah, legends. So basically, it still is sitting there floating around somewhere. It doesn't have a permit, even though they've tried everything. They've said, we'll make it glass, we'll make it completely soundproof, we'll move it to another space. They're not letting it happen. So the rumor mill is that some big giant developer has paid off the council to fuck them over and lose their permit. And it also got burnt down, and they found out who burned it, and that is sus too. So I would say some big money came in to squash the creativity, which is disappointing because Melbourne has always been known for its creativity, but Melbourne City flipped, and I reckon that one actually did get fucked over by the city council. Time will tell. I reckon those guys are going to city council, and I reckon they're going to win. So I just thought of a sub story that I reckon you guys will find interesting. So I used to do heaps of boat cruises here. So it was like when I was fucking 18, 19, 20, I used to do boat cruises, and I'd get my mates to bring their decks and shit and their speakers, and we would hire boats. It was called the Victoria Style or the Lady Cutler, and we would put these like fucking shitty as like stage shows without even any lights on them, and we would have to bring pizzas, and then we were allowed to run these like kind of like water raves. These boats sucked. The actual boat cruises, looking back on it, basically sucked too. And I'd sell like 200-300 tickets, and I normally attach them to a brand. So I'd do like Corova Fridays boat cruise, or Debbie Does boat cruise, or whatever. I used to do heaps of them during summer. They were a good time. If you lived in that generation, you definitely went on a boat cruise because they were fucking, every week there was someone running them, but you didn't really make a lot of money. You sort of did it because it was fun. So we do these little boat raves, and there's this one yard where I got absolutely smoked by security guards. So we're on this boat, and it was a TFU boat cruise, I believe. I'm pretty sure it was a TFU boat cruise, and we were running it. I was running it for the brand, and there would be this commotion. We were there, and then something had happened on the boat. And if there was a punch on the boat, there's nothing you could do. They just had to separate them with the guards, and then hopefully it would sort itself out. Or they would kick them off from Williamstown. But it was basically like a really bad situation if that happened. So when this happened, I ran the event. Something had happened. So somebody grabbed my now wife at the time, and the boys and myself, we weren't very happy. We were young, dumb, full of fucking, you know what. And we were like, well, this is going to kick off. And then the guards and everyone sort of come up and they were like, if you do this, you'll never run a boat cruise again. So I sort of told the boys, hey, we're not going to do it on the boat because this is my job. We need to work this out. But when we get off the boat and these guys get off the boat, it's on like Donkey Kong. And they knew it, and it was fucking murmuring up. You could cut the tension with a knife. And then as soon as the boat landed, these dudes legged it. So they ran, they jumped over the railings of the boat, sort of did like a fucking leap of faith, and they landed on the docks. And as did we. So we went straight away. And there's people jumping everywhere. And one of the guys, one of my good mates' brothers, he actually missed the pier and he fell and he went down. We actually thought he went into the water. But he sort of hit the fucking pier and bounced back into the boat in the second level. Anyway, that didn't stop us. So we kept running and everyone was chasing. It was just over there, or just here probably, like directly here. I was running and the guard who knew me, I'd spoken to him beforehand. He knew that I guess I was maybe one of the instigators. I don't want to blame myself, but maybe one of the instigators of this brawl. So he just fucking completely stopped. He put a full stop to it. But as I ran past, he just chinned me. And I remember I was running like over here chasing the guy with a bunch of other friends. And there was sort of like little breakout brawls kicking off everywhere. And all I remember is like running, going, there he is. And then next thing I know, I just like, boom, my eyes wake up and I was on the ground, that taste of fucking, that going on and like taste of dirt in my mouth. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? Like, what's going on? And then I quickly realized that the security guard had just completely dropped me to de-escalate the situation. Friends came over. I don't even know what happened because I don't even remember. I got put into a car. Actually, it was Corova boat cruise. It wasn't TFU. I got put in because I remember sitting in the car with a fucking arm afterwards. So I went there. My arm was killing. Had rice on it. Rah. Next day, woke up. Was in super pain. I actually had to go to the hospital and I'd fractured my wrist. So I fractured my wrist because when I fell, I just like mongy-armed into the ground because I didn't see it coming. And play silly games, get silly prizes, and that is a perfect example of don't be a fuckwit because you get treated like one. And I got treated like a fuckwit all the way into this bitumen right here. I wonder if it remembers me. The club we're checking out is on Flenders Street, but down here, this is Tram for those that know it, or back up there, it was Bar Code. And then apparently there is another nightclub underneath the ground there. So there's 3 nightclubs now that aren't operational in this space and venue. I walked past this club in my King Street video because I didn't know what it was. But here lay Mega Bar. So Mega Bar was before my time, but as I've gone through my learning generation, talking to different people, this one keeps coming up over and over and over again. And it's been coined up for discussion as Melbourne's first recovery nightclub. A lot of people tell me this is where they used to end their weekend. Sunday morning into Monday, they would party here and then they'd go to work or do whatever the fuck they were going to do. But behind me, here sat Mega Bar, which has probably been coined as. I'd love to hear this as a discussion. Tell me if I'm wrong. I know there's another one called Subway they talk about. But people say that Mega Bar was the first ever recovery nightclub in Melbourne that sort of started that trend that went on for 20, 30 years. Now, there's only revs. I don't think there's that many. But there was times and points, especially in my tenure when I was running nightclubs, where fucking every club ran to 10 a.m. and if it didn't, it was shit. I don't have a lot of yarns from Mega Bar because it was before my time. So if you do, leave it in the comments below, please, because I'd love to hear it. But that was Mega Bar, and apparently it used to go fucking off. And it was the last stop shop for Melburnian nightclubbers. Guys, this video is about to come to an end. If you like this, please like, follow, subscribe. Share it with a fucking friend. I haven't done one of these for 3 or 4 months, and it's because I'm doing so much shit all the time. So make it worth it for me. If you love this video and you want to see more of them, I've still got more clubs that I've got to do. I've got to do all the Crown ones. A lot of controversy over there. I've got to do Hellfire. I've got to do Hidden Forest. There's all clubs externally to this, like Fitzroy Street. There's so many nightclubs that I haven't touched on yet that have fucking crazy yarns. There's Vatican's another one. Like, I'm just going through my head, and you guys are going to continue to put them down. The ones that I've forgotten that you haven't seen in videos I've done, keep letting me know because I will cover them all. Give me the motivation to do it. Let's blow this video the fuck up. Guys, thank you so much for watching this. If you keep raving, I'll keep ranting, baby.